The old flip.
It's great for YouTube.
I need a section.
Tomorrow about sometime afternoon we'll do a flip drive. Is that what you guys want?
No, I just need to comments about the car. I will actually go to car.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, if you take your seats, people in the back, please stop talking and sit down, please. I can see that far. I know who you are. I still know who you are. Please sit down. I see farther back than that, guys. Please sit down.
Okay, Jim.
I would like you to all welcome Dr. John Lott, who has done some of the seminal statistical and economic work on the right to keep and bear arms. And I would like to welcome him now because he can explain himself better than I can. Thank you.
Misrepresentation about the stand your ground law over the last few months. But I think it's pretty clear to everybody by now that the stand your ground law wasn't, or at least the aspect of the Self-Defense Act regarding the stand your ground wasn't really relevant to the Zimmerman case. So I'm going to stay away from that. So I'm going to talk about the spate of multiple victim public shootings that we've been seeing. And I guess I want to start with a question, and that is, why did the killer in the Cinemark Century 16 Theater in Aurora, Colorado, picked that theater to go and engage in an attack on July 20th. I don't think people realize this, but out of the 7 movie theaters that were playing the Batman movie within 20 minutes of the killer's apartment, there was only one, the Cinemark movie theater that had posted signs banning permanently concealed handguns in the movie theater. It's kind of a frustrating story for me in terms of finding this out. I finally, after many years pestering Fox and a couple other places, got Tim McCourt to agree to run a story if I could nail down what was there, but it took me about 2 weeks to finally get this for one movie theater. It was very difficult to contact. But in Colorado, private property owners and businesses are allowed to decide whether to post signs for whether or not people can carry concealed handguns there. Just like they can determine whether people get service if they wear shoes or shirts or not. And the vast majority of movie theaters and restaurants and businesses allow customers to be able to go and carry permanent concealed handguns, but there are a few that post. Just like you see in most states, it's pretty much the pattern. A number of states, not all right-to-carry states, allow posting. And you'll initially see a lot of places that post for the first couple of years, but then after a while, when they realize that a lot of the fears that they might have had aren't true, then you begin to see the postings being removed. And so using MapQuest and movies.com, as well as trying vainly to get some groups in Colorado like Rocky Mountain Gun Owners Association and others to try to help out without success. I was finally able to pin down how the different movie theaters, whether they're posted or not. And if you look at within 20-minute drive, according to MapQuest, of the killer's apartment at 1690 Paris Street in Aurora, you find that the Cinemark movie theater was 4 miles away. It was about an 8-minute ride. There was another movie theater, the Aurora Plaza, which was only 1.2 miles away, 3-minute drive away. And then there was the Harkins Northfield 18. It was about 5 miles away, a 10-minute drive. And if you call up their hotline, they bill themselves as home of Colorado's largest auditorium. And in fact, that was the auditorium that was being used that night for the Batman movie. And so you would think that would be particularly attractive if you have the largest audience there. If you want to go and try to kill as many people as possible, you would think that would also be an attractive target. There are 4 other movie theaters within 20 minutes. 3 were 10 miles away. Another one was 13 miles away. Now, if you go and look at media reports after the attack, there's a number of media reports that do mention that the attack occurred, quote, near the killer's apartment. But it's kind of implied from the reports that this was the closest movie theater, when in fact, as I just mentioned, there was only one that was 1.2 miles away, as opposed to 4 miles away. And, you know, no discussion there, no analysis of what the other movie theaters were like, or whether one was even closer or not, just simply the statement that it was near his apartment. And, you know, why then would the killer pick this movie theater to go and do it? And I guess for this audience, it's not particularly a novel question to go and ask. But it raises the general issue about who obeys these types of laws. And it's not just limited to these gun-free zones. It's a question that's relevant for all types of gun control regulations. Because if you end up with a situation where it's basically the most law-abiding good citizens who obey the laws and not the criminals, so you disarm law-abiding citizens relative to criminals, you can actually have the opposite of what we'd like to have happen. You can have these types of bad events. And I suppose, you know, we've seen this type of discussion in many places. You look at something like the Virginia Tech attack, in which 32 people were killed. You know, again, it's understandable. The idea is if you just ban guns in certain areas, you'll make them safer. But, you know, in a state like Virginia, there are very few places where permanently concealed handguns are banned. Universities are one of the very few places where that's true. But if you're a professor, let's say, and you're able to carry your permanently concealed handgun virtually any place in the state except for school property, if you carry it on school property and you get caught, what's going to happen? You're going to get fired for a firearms-related violation. If you get fired as an academic for a firearms-related violation, what do you think the probability of being able to go and get another academic position someplace else in the United States is? As close to 0 as you can get. You know, if you're a student, over 21, have a permit, again, you're able to carry it virtually any place in the state. If you carry it onto school property and you get caught, you're going to get expelled. Maybe it's not quite as close to 0 as it is per professor, but if you get expelled for a firearms-related violation at an American university, you're going to find it extremely difficult to go and finish your college education. You're going to have to basically reconcile yourself to the fact that you're never going to get a BA if that's what you're working on, or never able to get a law degree or an MBA or whatever degree that you're working on. So in both of these cases, getting caught in those cases is going to be really life-changing events. If you're the professor, you're basically going to have to reconcile yourself to the fact that you're going to have to find a completely different line of work for your livelihood. And if you're a student, you're going to have to realize you're never going to go and get that degree. Now, if you're the killer, though, and you've already killed 32 people and facing 32 death penalties or 32 life sentences, you know, there's somehow the notion, you know, even assuming that he had lived, and in the Virginia Tech case, of course, he died, and about 75% of these multiple victim public shootings, the killers died. You're somehow the notion that the threat of expulsion from school is going to be the penalty that's going to make the difference, more than the 32 death penalties or the 32 life sentences, just doesn't seem to me very credible. You know, when you're talking about Colorado, you have about 4% of the adult population with permanently concealed handguns. Apparently there were several hundred people. The vast majority of them, since it was a midnight showing, apparently were adults or young adults in the movie theater, from at least talking to a couple of police who had been there at the time. And you would think in that type of situation, you would have an extremely high probability that at least someone who would have been unknown to the attacker would have had the permanently concealed handgun with them, if they had been allowed to go and take